LueRachelle Brim-Atkins, thank you so much for joining us for Like Fine Wine, Black Joy Over Time.
My pleasure.
I'm so excited to have you here. This project is in addition to being an opportunity for the community to hear about the ways that folks in our community have historically and currently experienced joy in our lives. It's also an opportunity for me to love on folks that have contributed to my development. And I met you when I was 29 and getting ready to turn 30. I was like 3 weeks from 30.
Yes.
And it was just a pivotal time and one of many pivotal times in my life. And it was such a joy to travel with you to Kenya. And it was really powerful seeing the ways that you navigated some of the challenges that we came across. The trip's intention was to connect women of the African diaspora to women in Kenya and to hang out and support work that was happening in communities on the ground. And I remember a time when we found out that some of the girls at one of the programs was being mistreated, and you were on fire about it. And where everyone was upset and bothered by it, but you were like, no, we can't just be upset about it and leave.
Absolutely.
Right. And so since then, I've known you to be really creative and resourceful around the ways that you leverage communities that you're in to resource different projects around the world. So like, from clean water projects to the one that I always tell people about is the menstrual pad kits for girls in Cameroon and in Kenya. So you organize different spiritual communities, like not just churches, but a synagogue and a mosque,
Catholic church,
and a Catholic church,
and AME church.
See, that who does that? You do it because you're magical and you're joyful, but you're an inspiration to me, and you're someone that I look to when I think about how to leverage resource to make things easier and more joyful for other people. And so I really appreciate you being that example.
Thank you for that. Yeah. My grandfather always said, Christ said, if you love me, you feed my sheep. So for people who say they have a spiritual connection to God, for me it is, then you need to be doing something for somebody else. And if you're not, what is that?
Right.
What is that?
Right. And I think one of the beautiful things about you is that you do that, but you also have a lot of fun.
I do.
And it's like,
you only come this way once that we are aware of.
Right.
May as well have a good time while we're here.
Right. So like, how do you, one of the things I ask myself, and maybe you'll answer through our time together, is how do you manage to get so much work done and enjoy yourself so much while you're doing it?
Well, I don't do work that I don't enjoy doing. That does not mean that all work is fun for me. I do racial equity work, so that's not always fun. In fact, many times it's not. But there's a joy that comes with doing the work because I know there's a goal that somebody will feel differently or be treated differently because we create a path for them. And so it just brings me joy to know that I can impact that. And I just... I know that people look for their purpose in life and they look for the work that they were called to the planet to do. And I'm just so blessed that I found mine really early on and have used the rest of my life to do that. Even when I was teaching, which is not what I wanted to do, because all of my people were teachers, my grandparents, my parents. And I was like, I'm not going to teach. And then, of course, I taught for a few years. But even at that, I taught differently than a lot of other teachers. I'd invite kids to my house. We'd have chili parties. Then the boys would go home. The girls would stay and try to tell me raunchy jokes. And, and 50 years later, I'm still in touch with some of them. Wow. So it's like people say, well, that would probably be illegal today. And I'm like, well, that's probably why I'm not doing it, because I can't do that. I can't do anything unless I feel the joy that comes from it.
Right.
And that's what those kids gave me.
Right.
They talk about what I gave them, but they have given me unspeakable joys.
Right.
Just to let me be part of their lives and to make an impact. That just brings me joy. If I couldn't do it that way, I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, can you tell us some of the ways that you experienced joy as a child? Or share an instance?
Yeah. I have such great memories of my childhood. I grew up in Texas in a segregated community, so that was not joyous.
Right.
I mean, that situation was not joyous. But I had a family who knew how to have fun. So my grandparents, we used to play games, board games, card games, those kinds of things. But my grandmother was a great cook. And she liked to cook and she liked to eat, and we liked to eat her cooking. She would make this wonderful food, and then she would teach me how to make it. But this part was slightly annoying, because she'd say, you just need a little more sugar.
Yeah.
Just a little more salt. And I think about that now, and I think it was her way of saying you got to be a really, really good cook. Because in my house, you did it well, or you didn't do it. That was the message.
Right.
But it was fun to sit in the kitchen with her and cook. It was also fun to watch the two of them, my two grandparents, interact with each other, because they liked each other.
Oh, that's
They
sweet.
they loved each other, but they liked each other.
Yeah, say more about that, because I feel like that is unfortunately super rare, but I love seeing that.
Well, when I was a kid, I took it for granted. So I just thought they were old people, and that's what old people did. Till I grew up and I met some old people, and they were not experiencing that level of joy.
Right.
But they would wake up in the middle of the night. I would hear them talking, middle of the night they'd be talking. And my grandfather would say, I sure have a taste for apple pie. And my grandmother would say, well, let's get up and cook one. And they'd get up and he would peel the apples. She'd make the pastry. They'd put this pie together, talk to each other while the pie was cooking. And in the morning, I'd wake up and see 2 slices of pie cut out. I mean, it was, and I was thinking, who are these people? But they loved each other and they liked each other. So little things brought me joy growing up in this small town, Naples, Texas. Walking in a field after a rain.
You
could just smell the nitrogen being released in the air. I'd walk barefoot and just, I relaxed thinking about it. Picking peaches off the trees in our orchard, or picking blackberries off the vines and making blackberry cobbler and all of that. Going fishing with my brothers.
Wow.
I mean, I look back at it and think, boy, that was fun, but we just thought that was the way the world works.
Back to the fish. What kind of fish did you catch?
We caught brim.
Okay.
And catfish.
Okay.
And we had our own ponds. We had 3 ponds on our property.
Wow.
And I remember once we went, my 3 brothers and I went fishing, and my grandfather dug the worms for us, and off to the pasture we went to go fishing. And big pond, and way across the pond we saw water moving. And we're like, oh, what is that? And then the water kept moving. We realized it was a water moccasin.
Ooh.
And we dropped the poles, we dropped the buckets. The worms were released. And up the hill we ran, screaming. I mean, screaming the entire way.
Wow.
And my my grandmother thought something was wrong. She's like, what's the matter? What's the matter? And we were like, I'm water moccasin, and she's like, did it bite you? And we're like, no. She said, where was it? We were like, across the pond, this huge pond. There was no way that snake could have gotten us. My grandmother was on the ground laughing.
Oh.
She thought that was she said, but I mean, it was not only did we learn to laugh, we had to laugh at ourselves because my people laughed at us and at themselves.
Yeah.
And she thought that was hysterical. We failed to see the humor.
Right.
But she thought it was. So just little things like that. And I look back at it and think, there are snakes in Texas, and there are rattlesnakes, all kinds of snakes. Yeah. But we would go into our pasture and pick these blackberries, and I know there were snakes all around. It never occurred to us. We were just happy to be with each other, picking berries, because we knew there was going to be a cobbler at the end of it.
Right.
The ones that we didn't eat on our way home.
Right.
Yeah, so just little things that people would probably think are inconsequential.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Actually, picking blackberries was something that gave me a lot of joy as a kid.
Yeah.
And and every summer I wait for the first one.
Yes.
And then, but that's my challenge to myself is to make some blackberry pies. You heard it.
Oh, I heard that challenge. Invite me over.
I will.
I remember my mother came to visit me here in Seattle. Mm-hmm. And that blackberry is all around, but very few people pick them. Mm-hmm. And my mother said, you can tell there's no depression. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, there are berries on the vines.
Right.
She said during the Depression, those vines would have been picked clean because people were hungry and they ate any food that they could find.
Right.
And I had never thought about it because I was one of the ones passing by some of these vines.
Right. Right.
That had berries on them. Yeah. So those little things brought me joy as a kid. I used to watch my grandparents play dominoes together. And yeah. Wow, being in their presence brought me joy because they were good people. My mom, my maternal grandparents, I knew them better than my paternal grandparents. But they just seemed to know how to have fun despite the circumstances in which they found themselves. Because my grandparents founded the African American high school in our town, and it served the county.
Wow.
And they had to fight tooth and nail. My grandfather had more education than the white principal. He made less money.
Yeah.
He had to pay the light bill
of the school
for the school, and the white school paid their own. They had taxes paid. I mean, just horrible kinds of things.
Right.
And yet they managed to find joy in living. And did a really good job, I think, of trying to shelter us from the nastiness that was around us.
Yeah.
Kept us at the church where people loved us and we knew that we were loved. We didn't dare get in trouble because we knew that the news would get home before we did.
Right.
And we just knew that. Nobody ever said, they're going to tell if you get out of hand. But just knowing that whole black community had our backs.
Yeah.
And would do their best to protect us.
Yeah. Which
was no small feat.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad I'm talking about this. This is bringing me joy.
I'm so happy. It's certainly bringing me joy.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like such a magical childhood. What about your 20s and 30s? Like, what was that like for you in terms of joy?
Yeah. So my 20s and 30s, I don't know if you know what a poll tax is. A poll tax.
Not exactly.
So, in Texas, in order to vote, people had to pay a poll tax.
Was it all people that had to pay a poll tax?
Yeah, theoretically. But, poor people couldn't afford the poll tax, and many black people were poor. my grandfather, because he was an educator, was the only black person in our town who was allowed to vote. And I don't know that he was allowed to vote. He just voted. He just went to vote. And my mother said that when they were children, he would walk into town, which was 4 miles from our farm, and vote and walk back. And they would sit nervously at the edge of the lawn. And when they'd see him, they'd run and greet him as though he had been on a trip, because they never knew whether he'd come back alive.
Wow.
Now, years later, he found out that his ballot was discarded as soon as he left the voting. Wow. So when people tell me they don't vote, I'm like, oh, no, I vote.
Yeah.
I'm going to vote because my grandfather risked his life for me to vote.
Yeah.
Even if I don't think there are any candidates worth voting for, I'm just going to choose the lesser of the two evils and vote, because it's my way of honoring him.
Yeah.
And for them to have that kind of a life circumstance and still have fun.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, how dare I act as though the world is coming to an end because I have some misery.
Yeah.
Misery comes with life, but you still find the joy in it.
Yeah.
And that's... So 20s and 30s, I was registering people to vote.
Wow.
Walking in places, in taverns that I had never been in. My people were teetotalers, and registering people to vote, and hearing people say things like, well, I can't afford the poll tax. And we were saying, did you know they had abolished the poll tax? They had repealed it. You didn't have to pay. But you know that the powers that be didn't want people to know that. They didn't want black people to know that. They wanted them still to think that they couldn't afford to vote.
Yeah.
So that brought me joy, just to bring that good news. We no longer have to pay the poll tax, and you get... Now, we registered people. I don't know how many of them voted, but that wasn't my contribution. My contribution was to get them registered. And we walked those streets just, as one of my friends says, happy as if we had good sense. We were just, it was like we felt like we were making a difference.
Yeah.
And then one of the other things that brought me joy was I graduated from University of Texas.
Okay.
Hook 'em horns. And there were no black football players at the University of Texas.
Wow. What year?
I graduated in 1968.
Okay.
And Darrell Royal, who was the coach, said that black boys' morals were too low to play for him, and they weren't smart enough to get into the University of Texas.
Wow.
The football stadium is now named for Darrell Royal, but that's another whole political discussion that I won't venture into. So my Saturdays were spent picketing to get black boys on the football team.
Wow.
And we'd actually go to the games and cheer for whoever we were playing if they had black guys playing. So University of Arkansas, for crying out loud, had black football players before we did.
Wow.
And so we go and hold up our placards that said Bevo, that was the mascot, Bevo the longhorn steer. Bevo needs soul. So, it's like even in protest, you have to have a sense of humor.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and then they tell us if we held up our placards, they were going to throw us out. So we'd reverse the placards and they'd say something else, just as much fun.
Yeah.
And until they did eventually throw us out, and we'd wait for the next game. But, it's like joy comes from believing that you're making a difference. That's for me. Even if you don't see the difference.
Yeah.
It's like Johnny Appleseed planting trees under which he would never sit and would never gather the apples. But he did it because that's what you do.
Yeah.
There's an expression, service is the rent you pay for being on planet Earth. And I really believe that. And when you do it, you get more joy than other people can even imagine.
Yeah.
So 20s, I was in picket lines and having a great time because I thought I was making a difference for somebody. I don't even like football, but that wasn't the point.
Wow.
That wasn't the point. The point was we have a right to play football.
Right.
We not only do we have a right, but you have a right to have a winning football team.
Right.
Hello.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. You're welcome very much. Yeah. So, that was my 20s. So I graduated college at 21 and struck out for graduate school.
Okay. Wow. So what does joy look like nowadays?
Oh, where do I start? So one of the things my children warn people about is do not mention Africa to her, please. Because
Haters.
we'll be here all night. If somebody says, well, have you been to... No, don't ask her. Please don't, because it's my favorite topic.
Yeah.
One of my favorite topics, So joy, one of the things that I learned from one of my mentors, John Sharon, he had us do a life purpose statement. And mine, and we do a meditation and then you come up with it. And mine was, and still is, creating and grabbing joy. I changed the world.
So I just learned this about you today.
Yeah.
Maybe an hour ago.
Yeah.
And I did not know this before I invited you to be a participant. And it makes me so happy that one, you even have a mission statement for your life. Or is it a vision or mission statement?
Well, we call it a life purpose statement. Why are you here?
Right.
So I'm here to create and grab joy so that I can change the world.
I love it.
And it really does guide my presence in the world. So I want to make a difference. I want to change the world. It's a lofty goal. I understand that. But I need to have joy while I'm doing it. So what brings me joy today? I'm co-president of Seattle Limbe Cameroon Sister City Association. And Seattle has 21 sister cities.
Wow.
2 are in Africa. So Mombasa, Kenya, that we have visited with Marsha Tatarunga.
Yeah.
And the other is Limbe, Cameroon. And both of those sister cities were established by Dr. Millie Russell, who has since passed away. May she rest in peace.
I did not know that she established them.
Both of them. She and her husband, Ed.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we've been to Cameroon 3 times. We would have gone more than that, but they are embroiled in civil war at the moment. So we don't go to countries that are fighting.
Right.
But one of the things that is really important to me is to feel connected to the continent.
Yeah.
And Nkrumah is credited with saying, we are African. Not because we were born in Africa, but because Africa was born in us. And I feel that it's at the deepest levels of who I am. And so I take people to Africa. When the Civil War started in Cameroon, we didn't go that next year. And then we decided, well, we can't give up our work. So we went to Togo and Benin, 2 amazing countries. We got caught in Togo by COVID and had to scurry home. Yeah. But we do work with menstrual care products. We create them here, and we do that in cross-cultural communities. So that's really important to me. I want people from all walks of life to live their lives as though any boundaries are imaginary. So boundaries around gender, boundaries around sexual orientation or religion or political beliefs or any of the other things that we set up to ostracize each other.
Yeah.
I just think that that's, even sororities and fraternities. I got in a lot of trouble in college because I was like, no, you people don't talk to these people. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's changed, but at the time I was in school, that was, prevalent. So it brings me joy to see people sitting in a room together, all from all walks of life. So we meet at an AME church, my church, AME church, a Catholic church, a mosque, a synagogue, men, women, children, and we all sit there and make menstrual care products
Yes.
for girls thousands of miles away who most people will never meet.
Right.
And yet we sit there and we laugh and we talk and we eat and we tell stories. We ask, well, what's your menstrual story? And the men say, well, let me see. I haven't had one yet, but
But we know it'll come.
But we know it'll come. So they laugh until we get to Africa. And we have certain assumptions about men in Africa. I had some assumptions. I thought, well, they're not going to want to talk about menstrual care products. But sometimes there are translators.
Oh, yeah.
And one principal of the school translated for us all day as we trained the girls on how to use these kits. They're washable, they're reusable, a sustainable product. And he would translate for us. And then at the end of the day, he said, may I have 2 kits for my wife and my daughter?
Oh.
And I said to him, well, you could, but we don't give the kits unless we can train people how to use them.
Yeah.
Who's going to train them how to use the kits? He said, I'm going to train them. I've been talking about this all day. I can train. I was like, you got it, brother. Here are your kits. Yeah. So we've just found perceptions of other people get squashed when you get to know other people.
Yeah.
So rather than coming in with these assumptions, ask.
Yeah.
We had a class where a young girl had started her period and stained her clothes. And she said that one of her male classmates walked up to her. She was at the chalkboard writing. He walked up to her. He just tied his jacket around her waist, put his arm around her shoulder, and walked her out and told her that she had stained. No laughing, no ridicule, no shame.
That's beautiful.
And I mean, how could you not feel joyous learning that there are people in the world, young people in the world, who can do that without batting an eye? And I get to be on a front row seat to see all of that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have any practices that that nurture and grow your internal joy, your internal sense of joy that doesn't come from service?
Do I have any practices that don't come from service? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Nicola, that's a great question. So I get accused of working all the time in my projects, so I'm trying to figure out. I think that's probably one of my shortcomings. Gosh, do I have any practices that don't come from service? Well, I quilt. Does that count?
Kinda.
Kinda. I'm grasping.
I only say kinda because I know how much you enjoy the act of quilting.
Yeah.
And I also know how you create these just spectacular pieces of art that then get donated or auctioned for a service.
Wow.
So
I think I'm going to have to work on that because I'm not good at resting. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think that I have. I mean, I'm trying to think other than quilting, and I don't donate all of my quilts. I mean, I sell some, I keep some, I make them for my friends and relatives and all of that. So maybe, and I do relax when I quilt. It gives me a creative outlet.
Yeah.
But I get so much joy from the things that I do in life that I don't think I need to take a break from it. And that's probably not a good thing. So I'm not advocating that. I
don't think, I think the inquiry is important because it's good to inquire.
Yes.
Because if you notice that, maybe I could try this on, that's one thing.
Yeah,
but if you're like, actually, everything I do is self-replenishing.
It really is.
So,
I'm beginning to feel a little guilty about that because I remember once I was talking, I had a therapist years ago, and she said, you need to just go to the park and she says, you're not good at being. You're really good at doing, but you're not good at being. And just go to the park and lie on the grass and look up at the sky and just breathe and relax. And I was like, and then what do I do? She said, no, you're missing the point. You're not going to do anything. So I don't know that I have...
I say try it on, explore it.
I'm going to try.
And if it feels good to you, do it.
Well, my leg is broken, right? And my friends say, well, I guess God just decided to sit you down. I'm like, no, God and I don't do that kind of thing. But I think there may be some validity to maybe you just need to take a break. So I'm practicing that. I'm trying to just, that question is going to haunt me. What do you do to replenish yourself other than service? This will have to be part 2.
Part 2. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
So, I have seen I've seen your home that is filled with amazing and beautiful art from all over the world. And I know I've seen how joyful you are in travel, because that's how I met you, is on a trip, right? What advice would you give to the community at large about growing and nurturing and cultivating joy?
Well, one of the things that I heard years ago was, if you're going to laugh about it later, you may as well laugh about it now. So that if you're in a situation that is not all that pleasant, but in hindsight it will be funny, then just try to laugh about it now. Because laughter is healing. Yeah. Joy is healing. And now when I broke my leg, I was lying there in pain. And I said, well, if you're going to laugh about this later, you may as well laugh about it. And I thought, there is nothing funny about this. So I couldn't find the joy at the moment, right? But lying here every day trying to heal, there are some funny moments. And so I guess my advice is to look for the joy, grab it, create it. If you're not feeling joyous, find some way to get it, because life is short and then you die.
I love that.
And if you haven't brought some joy in your life, what was that all about? I met with the Dalai Lama in India. My daughter and I went
Wait a minute.
What?
Wait a minute. You're not about to just roll. I heard it before it even happened. You're not about to just roll.
Yeah, we met with the Dalai Lama.
That we met.
Yeah, we did.
What, you met with the who?
The Dalai Lama.
The who? The what?
In Dharamsala, India. My daughter and I, my older daughter and I. Wow. And he talks a lot about joy and happiness. Yeah. And that's the reason we're called to the planet. Yeah. We're here to experience joy. And I've been in situations where people don't have money and they're joyous. Where they are not surrounded by the stuff that we are surrounded by in this country, and they're joyous. They sit and talk to each other and laugh and tease and play games and sing. And So for me, seeing all that all over the world teaches me that while I have stuff, too much of it, in fact, that's not what my life is about.
Right.
You know, I collect stuff when I go places because I want to point to, oh, that was on our trip to, oh, that was when we were in Timbuktu. Yeah. Oh, that, you know, that kind of thing. But the stuff is not what life is about. It really isn't. And so many of us spend our life energy collecting stuff and not relating to people, not just sitting and talking. There are people who go to Africa only to see the animals. And I'm like, there are people in Africa. Did you know that?
Oh, those the people who are, you've been to Africa? Tell me about the animals. I'm like, yo.
And the animals are wonderful, but there are people in Africa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful people who I can learn so much from. There's a group of graduate students at the University of Washington who I just met. And these are some really smart people. I mean, like one who's told me that I'm now her mother. You're my mother. I'm going to call you Malu. She calls me that, and she calls me almost every day. And she says, and I'm going to come to the house, and I'll be coming home. I mean, because she was organizing support for African students.
That's right.
Who come to the university and get no support when they get here. They arrive at SeaTac, no one picks them up. They don't know where they're going to live. Their visa, they try to use their visa card. It gets canceled because the people in their home countries think that someone's committing fraud because they're in a different country. Their money from the university hasn't shown up yet. They go to look for an apartment, and people say things like, well, you're from Africa. I don't know if you're going to bring rats in here. I mean, you're going to bring a rat from Africa? That's transporting. Why would you do that? It's just absurd kinds of things that happen to people. One young woman said she was 4 months pregnant when she came and didn't know. She thought she'd just get off the plane and get on a bus and go, you know. Took her 8 hours to get from SeaTac to the University of Washington. 8 hours. So I'm working with these young people to be sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And, you know, Malu, thank you so much. I'm like, if you knew how much joy this brings me, you would charge me some good money. Because that's the thing, you know, people think you're doing something for them, and it's purely selfish because I get to have joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just never occurs to me that everybody doesn't want to do that. You know, it's like, you mean you're not doing anything for anybody? What's wrong with you? I don't say it quite like that, but that's what I'm thinking. You know, it's like, yeah. So just meeting them and doing, you know, people in Seattle are very generous, very generous. You know, people donating sofas and chairs and desks and pots and pans and dishes and sheets and mattresses, and without any pressure.
Right.
I just sent an email out and people, I got this, I'll bring. And then I get to meet all these wonderful people. Wow. One of them came and didn't have an apartment. She's from Ghana.
Oh, okay.
She spent 2 nights with me. We just had the best time. Auntie Lou, I'm coming back. She lives in Linwood. Do you know last week she caught 2 buses and the light rail to come to see me?
Oh, so sweet.
And I said, well, just spend the night. You know where your room is. She said, no, I have an early class. I'll be back next week. So, you know, it's like, why would I not have all this fun?
Yeah.
I just can't even imagine it being any different.
What would you tell children about joy?
I tell them the same thing I tell adults because I tend to talk to children like they're adults. And by and large, they're a lot smarter than some adults that I know. So So I just say to them, you need to give back to somebody else. And when you do, it'll come back to you fourfold. I mean, you'll have more than you ever gave. And I know that to be true.
Yeah.
So and kids get that.
Yeah.
They sometimes get it better than adults who've been sort of acclimatized to me and mine, and I've got to keep it. And the kids are like, oh, I'll go play with so-and-so.
Yeah.
Because nobody's sitting with so-and-so. Mm-hmm. Or I'll give you half of my sandwich because you don't have one. I mean, kids get that.
Yeah.
So I don't think I say anything different to kids than I say to adults. And I'm so glad the kids tend to hear me. Yeah, they do.
Are there any projects that you want the community to know about in the next, we're recording in the winter, or heading into the winter time, and this will probably be screened for the first time in the spring. Do you have anything between now and the spring that you want the community to know about?
Oh, I always have something.
I know.
I always have something. I think one day they're going, oh, here she comes. So a couple of things. So we have the Seattle Limbe Sister City Association that I mentioned, and we have a website, www.seattlelimbe.org.
And that's Limbe?
Limbe, which is our sister city in Cameroon. And we just finished a water project where we dug what they call a borehole. We called it a water well. Dug a borehole and built a storage tank in collaboration with Seattle Rotary 4.
Okay.
And they brought in 5 other Rotaries, and we brought in the Limbe Rotary so that we could have clean water at this regional hospital.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we will be doing more water projects.
Okay.
And primarily because I love to drink water and I want people to have clean water. And water is, without water, we don't survive.
Right.
And so we want to do more water projects. So if people want to help with that, I'm sure people want to help with that.
Oh, absolutely, people want to help with
absolutely.
that.
So that's one thing. We will start our sewing circles, we call them, again in March.
All right, nice.
If COVID behaves. Yeah. And so we will have people, men, women, children. Our youngest was 4 when he started.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And he learned to sew at the sewing circle.
Yes.
4 years old. Our oldest had her 90th birthday at a sewing circle. Wow. So men, women, children, join us at First AME or at Beth Shalom Synagogue or at Bet Hassan Mosque in Monroe. We drive to Monroe.
Okay.
Or at Assumption Church when Beth Shalom is not available. So I would love for people to do that.
Okay. What is the best way for folks to connect with that work?
The website.
The website. And what is the website for the? Is that through the sister cities as well?
It's SeattleLimbe.org.
Okay.
So that's how to get in touch with us.
Okay.
We also have a store on our website so people can buy things from Africa. We have Bamaleke hats.
Are those the ones with the little
popcorn, the peanuts?
Yes. They're crocheted, right?
Yes.
Those are so cute.
I know, and everybody loves them. We could have sold 50 of them at the quilt show in Puyallup last year because we wore them, and people were like, "Oh, where'd you get that? I want one of those." Yeah. So those are on there. We have fans that we got in Togo. We're gonna have wine totes.
Okay.
That we are making, and bowl cozies that are made of African fabrics.
Yeah.
And so just as ways to get people familiar with our work and to help us with our work.
Yes.
Because we don't plan to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that we're trying to do is bring younger people on to our board. Yeah. Because, one day I may get tired in about 40 years. And so...
That sounds about right.
That sounds about right. And we want young people to be ready to step up and move forward. So we have some younger people we've brought onto the board so people could join us in any of that work. Yeah. Always have something for people to do. My grandmother said, idle mind is the devil's workshop.
It sounds like you took that
I
to
took
a
it
whole
to heart.
different level.
I did. Some days I wonder, is that too much, is it extra? And I do believe that we have to stay busy doing something for somebody else. Yeah, and it comes back.
For sure.
It comes back fourfold.
Oh, well, LueRachelle, thank you so much for spending time. Thank you for saying yes to this project.
Oh, absolutely. I'd say yes to you for anything.
Oh, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Well, really, again, appreciate your time and looking forward to having more engagement with your projects too.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
And thank you for asking me. This was fun and brought me great joy.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
Thank you.
All right.